Hi, I'm Travis Childs, Director of Education at the History Museum. Welcome back to another episode of Time Travels with Travis. I should have time traveled to somewhere warm, but this, where we're standing, is possibly the most famous corner in South Bend. This is the corner of Jefferson and Michigan Street, and this is where the five Studebaker brothers got their start in the wagon building business and eventually the car business later on. But at this corner is where they opened a blacksmith shop. Henry and Clem did, the two oldest boys, in February 16th of 1852. Henry and Clem were the two oldest. They had three other brothers that they came later at different times and fulfilled different positions within the company. Henry and Clem came here. Clem came here first. Henry kind of followed him, and they started up. There was about, I think, about 2 or 3 other blacksmiths in town when they showed up. They had learned blacksmithing from their father, John, who was a blacksmith in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and then Ashland, Ohio. And that's who they learned the trade from. They also had made traveling wagons before, what we would classify as a kind of Conestoga wagon that they used to travel, not only from Gettysburg to Ashland, but also here. So the brothers come, they're blacksmiths, they're doing okay, kind of struggling a little bit. J.M., the third oldest brother, decides that he is going to go out west to California after the gold rush had started and try to find gold. So he makes it out to Hangtown, California, and he made it out there because he was able to build, him and his brothers, a nice wagon for him to go out west on. So the brothers continue their blacksmith shop. They get into contracts with the United States government, the military part of the U.S. government. There is a war going on out west called the Mormon War, and they are providing wagons for troops and other equipment for the Army. All the boys were Dunkard Baptists. Henry was a Dunkard Baptist. They were all pretty well devout. Henry was kind of, we don't know if he was kind of torn, that he was not only a blacksmith, but he was making material, war material for the government. Dunkard Baptists are pacifists. So it kind of bothered his conscience and kind of wanted out. So they finally get a hold of J.M. J.M.'s made a fortune not by digging gold, but by actually making tools that gold diggers would need, 49ers would need, and he's made gold that way because the miners would pay him in gold. And so when he got word that Clem needed him back here and bring all the money that you have with you, J.M. comes back here and actually helps the company with a gap of capital that they need to get going. So after supplying not only wagons for the Civil War but the Mormon War, the Civil War especially, most of the veterans that went home, who were a majority of farmers, realized how tough the Studebaker wagon was. And so they would buy them. They rode here, and the boys would have one put together and they sent it out. In the meantime, Peter Studebaker and Jacob, the last of the two brothers, the two youngest, came to join the rest of their brothers. Henry retired. He went back to farming and other things. And Peter and Jacob were put in charge of basically sales. Jacob being a salesman and Peter being like the sales head. Peter had a great idea. The jumping off point to travel west was St. Joseph, Missouri. This is where people are all congregating to head out west to claim land. So he sets up the first, if you want to call it, Studebaker dealership. All of the wagons were assembled here in parts and then shipped to St. Joseph, Missouri, where they were finally put together and then sold to all the people coming into town to try to find rides out west. This helped the company expand, where they ended up taking up this whole block between Jefferson and Wayne, Michigan and Maine. And they continued to grow. So by the late 1860s, early 1870s, they had to move. They did not have enough room. They had been landlocked in here, with the popularity of Michigan Street becoming the center hub of what was becoming South Bend. And so they had to vacate this property, and they built a new set of factories down along the new rail line just south of town. And that's where the giant Studebaker wagon manufacturing plant really grew up. The buildings here that were left were occupied at all different times. Some of you may remember on this corner was Kresge's. Kresge's department store actually used one of the old original buildings. I believe they cut off the top floor of the building, but they used the rest of them. Though Kresge building, this empty lot was made empty and torn down in the 1970s. Late 60s, early 70s, was torn down. And so this was just an empty square for a while, and they've turned it into a Studebaker Plaza for that. So this is the possibly the most famous corner here in South Bend. Studebakers weren't the only, they weren't the first, but they actually put Studebaker on the map, because when you said Studebaker wagons, everybody knew it was South Bend, Indiana. Hi, welcome back again. We're time traveled down a little bit south of town to the place most people are familiar with, the Studebaker Corporation. Building 84 is behind me. All of this area down here was completely packed with Studebaker buildings, and they went even farther south than where I'm standing. When Studebaker finally got all these buildings up, this is when the car era, the automobile era, is coming in. There was 5 million square feet under roof on all the buildings combined. When they moved down here in the 1870s, the administration building, the office building, the business office was right here at Lafayette in the tracks. But unfortunately, in 1872, they had a bad fire and it burned it down, and then they replaced it with this building, Building 84. And so all this land kept being bought up by the Studebaker Corporation. They put up buildings and all kinds of equipment sheds and everything that they needed for car and wagon production. Wagon production kind of phased out by the early 1900s. They had made their first car in like 1903 or so, and it wasn't a gasoline operated car. It was actually an electric car, believe it or not. But this is where most people are familiar with the Studebaker Corporation. Lots of pictures of new cars sitting on this parking lot waiting to be shipped out. The original admin building, which was all kinds of different buildings, South Bend Community School Corporation, that was their headquarters for years and years. And so about the only buildings left from the Studebaker Corporation is the admin building and Building 84. Out of all those buildings, these are the only ones left. So I hope you enjoyed this Time Travels with Travis. We'll see you next month.